Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. If you haven't watched these before, I do them every Friday, and the way it works is we'll have a quick look at the major announcements for next week. Then we'll have a look at what's going on in the markets, indices, FX, commodities, Bitcoin. And then if there's any stuff you want looking at, if you put it in the chat thing, we'll jump back and have a look at the markets you want looking at. Interesting week this week. It's been a good week for me this week. I've caught a few moves in the S&P and the Nasdaq. I was in this yesterday. We had that move on Wednesday, the interest rates decision on Wednesday night. The S&P got knocked back to these lows from the week before. So I bought in yesterday thinking, has the market overreacted? Ended up being a good trade, and here we are. And I think there could be a trade to do this afternoon as well. We've just had the payrolls, of course. Not just had them, what are you talking about? About an hour ago, the payrolls came out, the US jobs numbers. Smashed through expectations. So expectation was 185,000 jobs due to be added, and 353,000 got added. So some big moves there in markets. The dollar index, quite the big move there. Because I suppose expectations are a strong economy takes the pressure off the US Federal Reserve, the central bank, in cutting rates, blah, blah, blah. So there we go. So loads to look at, I think, this afternoon. But before we do all that, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, there we go. Right, quieter week next week. It's been a busy week this week. We had US interest rate decisions. That was the big one. Well, one of the big ones. UK interest rate decision yesterday, non-farm payrolls today. So it's been a busy old week, quieter week next week. There's only a couple of things I thought was worth mentioning. Tuesday, we've got the Australian interest rate decision. And on Thursday, we've got China inflation data. So a bit of a nothing week, to be honest, next week, with apologies to Australians. But I don't think that's going to be any major market moving stuff in there. But I think given where markets are at the moment, I think it's going to be an interesting week. A quick word from the sponsor, which is me. Just do this quickly. I've started working with a new broker. The link to the broker is in the description down below. If you go to bit.ly/David Trades. I trade with these guys because I've known them, a couple of guys there, for quite a long time. They've got very tight spreads, and for me that's really important. Spreads is all part and parcel of trading. Pretty no frills trading, but for me that's exactly what I want. I do all my analysis and stuff on TradingView, so I just want to have a broker where I can get the trade done. You can trade really small as well if you want to, so if you have a smaller account size, you can still practice sensible risk management. I think that's really important. Small account sizes, particularly when you first start trading, or if you don't want to risk a lot of money. If you go and sign up with the broker, you'll see the details in the description to this video. And I'll be doing lots of webinars and stuff with them as the year goes on. So that's that. The WhatsApp group, I've been running a WhatsApp group for about a year now. It was originally just for those who had been on the trading course that I run, but I opened it up to anybody in the summer. You get a daily update from me. What am I looking at? What am I looking to trade? Levels I'm watching, all that sort of stuff. Other interesting markets I'm watching, what I'm doing with the trades I've got running. At the moment, I'm long Swiss yen, long copper, and short pound against the dollar. At the moment, any questions, people can fire in any questions throughout the day. So I think it's going well. It's a good little community. If you sign up, go to the website and sign up. And the website is davidjonestrading.co.uk. If you go there and use the code YouTube, you will get a 20% discount off the first month. So if you go to the website, the link to the actual page is in the description. But if you go to subscribe at the top, then as if by magic, there you go. It's there, WhatsApp group. So you can sign up for that and use the code YouTube and you get 20% off the first month. That's running a bit slow today, that website. But there you go. Blah, blah. Okay, so all of that is in the description down below. That's a snapshot of what it looks like. It's pretty active now and again. I did wonder, I've done quite a bit of day trading the last 3 weeks, which is a bit unusual for me. It's gone incredibly well, so I now think I'm a day trading genius, just on the NASDAQ and the S&P. So I did put in something about 10 minutes ago about perhaps some interesting day trades for this afternoon. And the final thing is the newsletter. So the newsletter's free. I send a newsletter out every Sunday normally, and I have actually started sending it out again this year. This weekend's newsletter is going to be even more interesting than usual, I think. But to sign up for the newsletter, if you go to the homepage, there's a box in there. So if you're not signed up, I do recommend you sign up. So there's the box to sign up. I send it out every Sunday. And this week, I am going to talk about my equities trading strategy, which again is a new thing for this year. I'll talk about it in more depth in this weekend's newsletter, but I wanted to trade US shares more this year. So I've been putting some trades on over the last 6 months. 6 months? 6 weeks. It has done incredibly well. Let's bear in mind, it is a runaway market we've had this month. So if you trade US stocks and you haven't made money this month, you should have a word with yourself, because the market's just been one direction for most of the month. So I'll talk about this in the newsletter at the weekend. But at the moment, I've got 20 open positions. I've normalised the risk down to £500, about £500 risk. The margin requirement is about 14,600. I'm assuming. Oh, I keep seeing these adverts popping up on the YouTube stream. I don't know. Okay. I've switched adverts on and I've just messed it up, obviously. Anyway, whatever. So these are all the positions. Actually, I need to update that because I've done a few more trades since then. But as of the 26th of Jan, these are the positions. 14.6 is the margin requirement based on a risk of 500 quid. And so far, it's up £2,378. So it's made just under 16% return on margin since the 18th of December. So I'll talk a bit more about this strategy at the weekend. It is pretty much one of the approaches I do on my trading course anyway. I talk about stocks I'm going to add in the WhatsApp group. Of course, I've got to say, past performance is no guarantee of future performance. And it has been a market that's just gone up and up this month. But it's a really interesting experiment for me this year. And what I look to do is do a trade every day on a US equity. And I put that in the WhatsApp group. So what's the big winners at the moment? Amazon's doing well. They had results last night, didn't they? That was the first one I did, 18th of December. MasterCard's doing well. That's up a bit as well. I've got a few shorts in there. Eaton Corporation, did that the other day. Put that in the WhatsApp group. Bought those at 247. They are 267 today. They've had a move, haven't they? So I will explain a bit more about this in this weekend's newsletter, and I'll put a link in to that spreadsheet. So like I say, it's made 16% in about 6 weeks. It has been a market that's been roaring higher. I don't, if it made 16% every 6 weeks, I'd be very happy. But let's be realistic. But I'll talk a bit more about the strategy behind that and a link to the spreadsheet. We'll see where it all closes today. So just make sure you're on the newsletter list, and it's free. And the link should be in the description, hopefully, to this video. There you go. Something different. Okay, and the website is there. All right, let's have a look at what's going on today. So we've had this move. Here we go. There's a big move last night. Let's stick with the S&P for now. There was a big move last night after the market closed. So this is where the market closed yesterday, 49.06-ish. And then we had those earnings out last night and bang, 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 off we go to the races. And we've given it up off the payrolls today. But I did wonder, was there a trade down here? And so far, yes, there was a trade, but I couldn't do it because I'm doing the live stream. But let's see what happens a bit later on. But, to remind ourselves, in case we need reminding, this is the trend in the S&P. This is a market that yesterday, overnight, hit fresh all-time highs again. It's a bull market. So I'm a buyer. of dips and I'm a buyer of strength in the S&P. Nothing has changed. You know, if we have a bit of a deeper sell-off, it gets a bit interesting. You know, I think for me, if we had perhaps a tricky February ahead and we saw a deeper sell-off in the S&P, I'd be looking at the lows from January, 4660, 4700, but it's a market that's still going up. NASDAQ, the same. You know, NASDAQ, we had all-time highs in the NASDAQ December last year, and that's carried on up. So, you know, what are you going to do? Go with the trend is what I'm going to do. But the trade this week, in hindsight, it's a really obvious trade in hindsight. You know, the market, these are the hourlies now on the S&P. You know, we saw the S&P faff around a bit, 22nd of Jan, 23rd of Jan, and then hits new highs, sells off on the interest rates. And, you know, I love these sort of trades where the trend is clearly up and the market gets knocked back to a level. How does it perform around that level? And we saw that level hold. So the market cared about the interest rate decision for about 2 hours and then back to normal. Off we go and the market goes up again. So I'm still, you know, bullish on these things at the moment, the NASDAQ and the S&P. The Russell, I mean, the Russell's an interesting one. The Russell 2000, you know, sideways, the small cap US market, sideways from August 22, breaks out in December last year, has pulled back and has just chopped around again in the range. I'd be quite tempted to be a buyer though of the dip here. If I was a buyer now in the Russell, I'd have my stop the other side of 1880. I think that's an interesting market. The DAX, the old German market, I mean, to me, that still feels strong. It just needs to break 17,000 properly, but the trend is obviously up on that. FTSE, as usual, doing its own thing. The FTSE was up 3% last year. S&P was up, I think, 23. NASDAQ was up 44. You know, the FTSE, very different market to other markets. But maybe there's an opportunity on the short term. This is another one we talked about in the WhatsApp group this morning. I think it's quite interesting. You know, if I was looking to get into that trend on the FTSE has been going for a couple of weeks now. Interesting to see what happens with the FTSE around 7,600 this afternoon. Let's see what happens there. And then finally, the Japan, the Nikkei. Massive move on the Nikkei in January, you know, from 33,000 to 37,000. What's that? 12, 13% move, something like that. So I'd buy the dip on the Nikkei. It's been a bit boring since then, but that's what I would do on that. So yeah, so for me, big focus is still going to be stock markets. I've got all these US stock positions now, so we'll see how they do. Yeah, so for me, a big focus this year is going to continue to be stock markets. If we take a look at currencies, I've had no interest really in currencies for the last few weeks. I have been short the pound against the dollar for what feels like forever. It's probably about 2.5 weeks. But the problem is, for me, if we look at something like the dollar index, this is the daily chart. What has it done since the middle of January? Nothing. It's just banged sideways. Yeah. So we've had the move today in the dollar index off the payrolls. Is this finally a breakout? I don't know. If I had to trade it, I'd probably go short at the moment because we're back at the top of the range. Short with a stop at maybe 104.10 or something like that. Could be a trade if you wanted to trade that range. But it's been just sideways, the dollar index. So of course, when we look at something like euro dollar, I mean, that has been drifting, euro dollar. Let's come back to that in a second. Something like pound against the dollar has been sideways as well. You know, and me, I want trends. So I have no interest in looking at markets that are going sideways. But so it needs to make its mind up, the US dollar. But euro, I mean, euro might be interesting next week. So euro, US dollar. This is the trend since September 22. The market ran a bit higher into December. We've been selling off since the end of December. Do we see this 107.20 area? Do we see the buyers come back in next week? Let's see. I think that's an interesting one to watch next week. So there's that. I'm in Swiss yen. I'm in that trade. That's also done nothing for about a week, 2 weeks. That one, that's pretty boring. So not a lot of excitement for me in currency markets at the moment until this US dollar decides what is it going to do. So that's that. Oil. I was long oil this week. I got stopped out. That was a losing trade for this week. And I was in the trade because of the trend. But we've seen big sell-off last night, wasn't it? 5 o'clock yesterday. on oil. Interesting. It's interesting because this has been quite the barrier for oil, this $80 a barrel. This is US crude. So going back to November, so going back December, January, February, nearly 3 months, it can't get through 80, which I thought was interesting. And it's happened again. You know, you can see it there. Let me just tidy this up a bit and get rid of some of these lines. You can see it there on the dailies. What a problem $80 a barrel has been for oil. So for me, not much interest at the moment. Let's see what happens next week. Do we see some support come in near 70? Maybe there's a trade there. So let's see. Let's see what happens. Heating oil, I was in that. I came out of that. I think this is interesting, heating oil. I came out for it for an okay profit. I think the thing with heating oil, for me anyway, is, you know, I think it's a bit clearer, again for me, than crude oil, because, you know, did we have, you know, downtrend from September into December, and is it trying to stage a recovery? And I think for me that the recovery argument still holds, you know. So even though it's absolutely been clobbered the last couple of days, I think the heating oil is meta 20% up. Someone's just typed. We'll have a look at that in a second. All right, let's have a look at it now. Meta up 20%. Wow. Wow, look at that. Smashing through the all-time highs. That's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, heating oil. Let's have a look at heating oil. I don't have Meta, unfortunately. So heating oil, I think that's another interesting market for next week. Do we see the buyers come back in? You know, the level to watch for me is this sort of 260 area. What happens around here? It's getting slammed today, though. So not much interest for me yet. But I think that's interesting if you see a bit of stability next week. And natural gas. I hate natural gas. I was long natural gas a few weeks back and I got stopped. And I look at it, but I never look at it for too long. I think this is an interesting market. You know, it's the volatility is nuts again. We had a 216 low in December. It trades as high as 340, so moves 50% by the middle of Jan. And here we are now down at 226. So it's lost $1.40, about 40% since those highs. I think it's maybe interesting next week what happens down at these lows. Do these old lows from December hold? And do we have another run at the threes in natural gas? But, you know, for what is still a major commodity, it trades like some tuppenny, halfpenny cryptocurrency, doesn't it? It's nuts market. So I don't really trade that. No. But interesting next week to see what happens around the 215 mark. Let's see what happens there. What else is interesting? Gold and silver. There was a good trade yesterday in gold, which I didn't do, on the hourlies. Oh, maybe even today it's the same trade. Interesting. I thought gold was interesting yesterday because it came back to the low of the day before. And the trend had been up. So the lows the day before were about 20.30. So the trend in gold on the short-term chart had been up for about a week. Came back to 20.30-ish. That was the trade. Ramps up to 65. And here we are again. We've done it again, 20.30. So I suppose that's interesting. So the shorter-term trend for me in gold is still up. The dailies is just a bit boring. You know, it's all just a little bit sideways. I'd rather be a buyer than a seller, but I'd rather buy it if it got slammed back towards $2,000. So not too much excitement for me in gold. Silver, I don't know. I mean, silver is just sideways for 10 months now, isn't it? Broadly speaking, lots of volatility, no real direction. I don't know. What would you do? Has that downtrend ended? I suppose if you thought that downtrend had ended, the trade, and it's a reasonable assumption, the trade would be to be a buyer, and I would go stops under 21.90. So that could be an interesting trade for somebody. It's not what I would do. Well, actually, no, it might be, actually. It might be. It's quite interesting. You know, if we bought it now at 22.55 with a stop at 21.70, 85 points risk, you know, if it does get a bit of a move on back up to maybe 24, where it was the beginning of the year, there's a $1.50 profit in that. So it's maybe an interesting trade. So that's that. What else is interesting? Bonds have been interesting. Bund has been, I would buy that actually. That's an interesting trend. So the European Bund, this is on the hourlies, has been, this is almost a textbook trade. Trend, I should say. Let me take some of this stuff off for now, just so we can see the trend. So we've had, since last Thursday, higher highs, higher lows. The market made a higher high yesterday. Has been slammed back on the payrolls. But I wonder if it's a buy the dip opportunity with a stop at least the other side of Wednesday's low. So that they're always interesting markets. I think bond markets, never that popular with a lot of retail investors or retail traders, but a really interesting market, I think, to watch. And what else? Bitcoin. Let's have a look at Bitcoin. It's been a bit boring, Bitcoin, hasn't it? I mean, it's just, I don't know if, you know, I saw someone asked about the ETF. The first question was, how do you think the Bitcoin ETF will impact the crypto market? It's had no impact, or it's been a negative impact. You know, it's been. I would say it's the classic case of buy the rumor, excuse me, sell the news. You know, this is when the ETF announcement was okayed, or was okayed by the SEC, the US regulator. And what's it done since then? Sold off. You know, so anybody who was buying on the day of the announcement, it's not down much. It's down 10%, which in crypto land isn't much, is it? But yeah, it's just a bit boring, isn't it? I think Bitcoin at the moment. I'd absolutely buy the dip. I'd just rather have a dippier dip than what we've seen so far. There's an argument for going short even. If I had to do a trade now, I'd probably go short Bitcoin. Go short with a stop above 44,000, maybe. But it's all been a bit of a damp squib, hasn't it, since the SEC okayed the ETFs. There's a lot of TLAs in that sentence. So Bitcoin, a little bit boring for me. In other markets, palladium, I haven't done anything with palladium. I mean, it's been absolutely slammed again over the last couple of years. Is it trying to make a base down here around 900? I don't know. It hardly manages to rally for very long, does it? So, yeah, it's sort of interesting, but no real urgency for me. Cocoa, which is the market I have watched go up since probably the summer of last year and never actually done anything about it. Crazy market, cocoa. New highs again today. So 4,900 at the moment. September 22 was about 2,250. So it's up, 80% or something, cocoa. Great trend in cocoa. I just wish I'd pulled my finger out and actually bought it down here somewhere. But you know, really interesting, some of the moves we're seeing in that. Orange juice. Look at that. I've missed that as well. I pointed out on the WhatsApp group this week. I thought I'd missed that. But again, another great trend in orange juice. Bang, bang, bang. Hits the highs in November, sells off, holds around the old levels from August. And here we go, off to the races again. So it's up about, 30% in the last, whatever that is, couple of weeks. Price of orange juice. So always some interesting stuff going on with the old commodities. But for me, you know, very much next week, my focus will continue to be on US stocks, on the indices and individual stocks. That Nasdaq's bounced back well. But also the dollar, just to see what happens. You know, at some point, it has to come out of this sideways range, you know, but we've been in it for a few weeks now. The euro is interesting because we're maybe back down to a big level around 107. But even in individual individual stocks, I do one or two trades a day for a more medium-term point of view. I said I've started day trading again, really short-term trading over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and there's normally one or two trades there as well. So I'm sort of busy enough just looking at stocks and stuff. But I think there's still plenty to watch over the next week. But you know, let's see what happens with these stock markets today. So what we'll do now is have a look at any stuff you want looking at. Let's see how my little stock trades are doing. Oh, it's not moved that much, is it? 15.79%. All right, let's see. So we'll have a look at anything you want looking at, and then we'll finish things up. So, like I say, sign up for that newsletter if you're not signed up already, because I'll talk a bit more about this stocks thing this weekend. Go to the website to sign up. You can sign up try the WhatsApp group, get all these updates every day off me, and use the code YouTube for 20% off the first month. But let's take a look at some of the stuff you want looking at. So we talked about the Bitcoin ETF. What's your analysis of H&M? H&M. What's the code for H&M? I wonder if you can find it. H&M Finance. I'm guessing, is it H&M the, what's it? The clothes company. H&M, there we go. H&M Hennies. Is that the only listing? What have we got? Hang on, let's put Hennies in. Why do these ads keep coming up? Hennies and Maritz. So it's this one. But which listing is it? It's listed in a few places. Hamburg? That one. There we go. I'm guessing that's the right one, isn't it? It's a bit scrappy, isn't it? I'm thinking I might not be looking at the right listing here. I would buy that. I would buy the dip when it stops dipping. You know, if we look at the trend since September 22 is up. So for me, it's still a bit weak at the moment. But I'd be a buyer, and I would probably want to have a stop the other side of 1170. This is in euros. So this is the listing on the German stock exchange. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's definitely made a base. March 2020 lows, COVID lows, came back to them around about 10, 9.5, 10 euros, and it's trying to get a bit of a recovery on, isn't it? So I think that's quite an interesting one. Meta. Let's have a quick look at that Meta then. Would you go short Meta on the basis that the market's overreacted? I mean, that is massive. What were their earnings like then? Let's have a quick look. Okay. So the estimate was 4.8 per share, and they did 5.33, so they beat by 10.5%. Interesting. I wouldn't go short Meta yet. I mean, that is an absolute ballistic move, isn't it? I was watching these for my US stocks, but I kept not buying them because there was the old highs coming up, and I thought maybe they'll struggle at those old highs, but bang, 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 here we are. I mean, that is an incredible turnaround in their fortunes, isn't it? So it's the old Facebook, if you're not familiar, but October 22, below $100, and today, knocking on the door nearly at $500. An incredible turnaround. And because they did that whole metaverse thing, didn't they? That was all considered to be a bit of a flop. But yeah, an amazing move by Meta today. What would you do? I'd try and buy the dip if the dip ever actually happens. How much would you recommend to start trading with? How much do you think is too little? I don't think there's not a right or wrong answer. I think that one of the great things about the number of brokers available today, probably one of the few great things, is that you don't need a lot of money to start trading. When I started trading way back in the late 90s, the spread bet and CFD market wasn't really that well developed, and you had to trade through a futures broker, and most futures brokers in the UK, at least back then, it was like 25 grand minimum to trade with, to have an account. These days you can open an account with, I don't know, 50 quid or 100 quid, so whatever you think is the right amount is the right amount, I would say. I don't think there's too little amount. And let's not forget, to quote my favourite line, most people lose. So if you've never done it before, I think you'd be a bit crazy to start with 50 grand, unless maybe you're worth 5 million, I don't know. But I would say, starting small is always a good idea. And because then you get to learn, how markets move, placing stops, all of that sort of stuff. And if you make mistakes, you're making mistakes on a relatively small sum of money, whatever relatively small is to you. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. And that's why another reason I trade with these guys, if you want to, you can trade tiny. So if I wanted to trade the NASDAQ with a 100-point stop, let's say, I want to buy it with a 100-point stop, I can trade 0.1, for example. Yeah, so on that trade, if I bought the NASDAQ, there we go, let's do it, bang. There we go. So I bought the NASDAQ, 0.1 of the NASDAQ. Oh, the S&P I bought, sorry. I really should pay attention, shouldn't I? I bought the S&P, 0.1, with a 100-point stop, and my risk is £10. Yeah, so I think it's a cheap, low-risk way of learning how to trade. And if you join through my link, you get all the webinars and everything else. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for that. Can we have a look at BT? Yeah, BT Group. Oh, I hate BT. I'm sure that, no, I've had a bit of a run-in with BT in recent months. What do you think? You could buy it, couldn't you? Bargain, bit of bargain hunting, maybe. If you thought, oh, that is tragic, isn't it? So it's gone from £5 a share in 2016 to where we are now. BT had just ignored the fact that there's been bull markets around the world, just doing its own thing. I mean, if you really wanted to be a buyer, I wonder what the dividend yield is on BT. I bet it's a good yield, isn't it? If you want to be a buyer, like a bottom fishing trade, perhaps a buyer with a stop somewhere the other side of 100, something like that. Let's have a quick look. Hold on a second. I'm quite curious now. What is the yield like on BT? My mum's router was broken. BT wouldn't come and fix it. They did eventually, but they sent out 3 replacement routers. So I thought that just about sums it up for me. Let's have a quick look at the FTSE. Let's have a look at BT, what their yield is. Because I bet the dividend yield is quite chunky, isn't it? Hang on, let's drag that over and have a look. Yield, 7% yield. Okay, 7% yield. So you get 7% in dividends if the price doesn't change for a year. Of course, if the price goes down 10%, the 7% is going to be small consolation, isn't it? But it's interesting, isn't it? As a sort of conservative blue chip, blah, 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 you know, down at these levels, whenever we've seen it down here over the last year or so, the buyers have come back in. So it's an interesting one. I just wouldn't hold too much hope of it hitting £2 anytime soon. Famous last words. But yeah, interesting one down here. If I had to do anything, I would buy it. And Lloyd's Bank. So another one is, it's a bit boring, isn't it? It's all a bit sideways, isn't it? What's the yield on Lloyd's Bank? Look at this. Looking at things like we're going to be investors and not just hold them for 3 hours. So Lloyd's Bank yield 5.7% on Lloyd's Bank. And again, it's been a sideways stock, hasn't it, since 2021-ish. We're at the bottom of the range, aren't we? So again, I wouldn't buy them, but if you're going to buy them anywhere, this is the place to do it, isn't it? Near the bottom of the range, see what happens. But yeah, it's just look at that. When was that? Financial crisis. So yeah, but just a little bit not exciting for me. Can we have a look at Swiss yen? Yeah, I'm long Swiss yen at the moment. That's done nothing. Maybe it's going to wake up and break out again. And the trend is up, so I'm long that. That hasn't done too much. Canadian Swiss franc, Canadian chuff. What's that look like then? If we had to do that, I mean, I would sell the rally in that, but again, not yet. I think on that one. And Aussie chuff. Yeah, I would sell the rally on that as well. So yeah, it's interesting, that one actually, isn't it? Is it? I mean, we do have this base down here on the Aussie dollar against the Swiss franc, but I would be a seller rather than a buyer, I think, on that one. Nice trend though. Lovely hindsight trade there, going back to sort of February last year. And it's dropped about 10% since then, hasn't it? So that's interesting. AJG. Oh, Arthur J. Gallagher. I've got those. I bought those this week, I think. I don't think they're in that spreadsheet, but I bought them. Yeah, so I'm in that one. Trend is up, obviously. It broke out. It got slammed on something. Ex-dividend, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I bought them. So for me, I'm in because the trend is up. If I was a buyer today, I'd have a stop probably the other side of 210, which is what, a 20% stop. And just to see, can it run back up to 253 or thereabouts, and maybe even higher. So yeah, Arthur J. Gallagher is one of mine. So I'm in that one. My question was Bitcoin was the long-term impact of the ETF. I mean, in theory, it should make it more attractive, shouldn't it? Because it's an easier way for people to get exposure to Bitcoin. So yeah, I think I like ETFs. So in theory, but I don't know. I don't. It's all gone a bit quiet. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I read the wrong things. But you never read about the blockchain much anymore, or I don't anyway. It's all AI, isn't it? Or AI is the flavour at the moment. So yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, it's a good thing having an ETF in Bitcoin, but I think it's going to take more than that to move the price one way or the other. So, what are your thoughts on Nvidia? NVDA. I think I would be a buyer. Gosh, they're off again today. Look at that. Yeah, should have bought those. Should have bought those back here. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Yeah, the trend is up, isn't it? I think I did trade those a bit last year in the live stream, didn't we? I think I had a bit of a trade going on in those from here to here. I would buy it. The problem I have with these runaway markets, as I often say, is where does my stop go? I would want my stop probably down at 460, which is nearly $200 away from where we are now, 30% plus. You know, it's just too wide. So I have a real problem in getting into a lot of these runaway stocks. I suppose an aggressive one, flipping this over to the daily charts, is a stop under $600. Could be interesting as a short-term trade, perhaps. I don't know. So yeah, maybe that. But absolutely, again, you cannot deny the trend. This is one of the reasons that I started trading US stocks this year, because what I'm hoping is to catch at least a couple of movers like this. You know, most of them won't do that, obviously, but if I can just latch into a couple of big movers, you know, it will make for an interesting year, I think. But yeah, you can't deny the strength in Nvidia, can you? So for me, the closest I would have a stop, the other side of 600, but actually I'd like it much further away than that. So I'd have to buy the dip, but there's no dip coming, is there? ATRA, ATRA. Atara Biotherapeutics. Looks a bit of a dog, doesn't it? Oh my gosh. Just exists to go down. 86 cents. No interest for me in that one. I mean, that is a bit of a lottery ticket stock, isn't it, I suppose? You know, I'm sure, you know, people buying them at $2 thought, how much lower can they go? Well, there's your answer. They can go another, what's that? 70% lower again. So for me, that is an absolute gamble. Not one for me. You know, if I was a buyer today, I would put a stop. Oh, they've traded as low as 20. Oof. Yeah, no interest. But I would have a stop. I would buy it and then hope one day that maybe it ends up being the next Pfizer or it goes bust. Not that I know they're going to go bust, obviously. But that's really been $65 a share in 2015. 86 cents today. Wow. Yeah, not one for me. Sugar, New York Sugar. Yeah, I missed that. If it's sugar was a really good trade for me last year, long-term trade. I bought it. I think I had bits of it here. I bought it again in July and came out on the sell back on the drop, and I missed the buy. This is where I should have bought it. I don't know what I do now, because again, where's my stop going to go? This is the problem for me in sugar. Where's the stop going to go? You know, on that chart, I'd still want my stop below 20, which is too far away. If we looked on the hourlies, I mean, it's only been the last month or so, isn't it, that it's moved as it has. So if we were doing the trade on the hourlies, where would I go for a stop? I would probably go at least the other side of 23, whatever that is, $23, whatever it is. But yeah, it turned around quite sharp in the end on the dailies, isn't it? And I missed it. But another interesting commodity market. Tesla is at the bottom of the range. Tesla. He's trying to get 25% of the company, isn't he, old Musk? He owns 13% at the moment. And what he said something about he can't deliver what he wants to deliver unless they give him a load of shares or something. Tesla, what's it done here? It was a good year last year, wasn't it? Because it went from $100 to nearly 300. But since the summer, it's been sideways to slightly down, hasn't it? So for me, I wouldn't be a buyer of Tesla. If it gets knocked back to 160, it looks interesting. If I was going to buy it now, I'd want to stop the other side of 150. But let's not forget what the wider market has done this month. It's been a great month. In January, for US indices. And what's old Tesla doing? Just slipping. So for me, it's always an interesting stock. It's just not one for me at the moment. And maybe if it slips a bit further, it gets to be a bit more interesting again. So I think, when you have so many stocks out there that are trending, I got no interest in trying to pick the bottom in Tesla for me. Ford. Let's have a look at Ford. Ford Motor Co. That's the wrong listing. Hang on. Ford. I don't know. What do you think? Where's that slip to? So it had a really good run, didn't it? From $4, a massive run to 26 in Jan 22. I wouldn't do anything, but if I had to do something, I would probably go short with a stop above 13 on Ford. I think so. If it maybe rallied a bit more from here, that's. But again, it's just look at it. It's just sideways. Since the summer, and again we've had runaway markets. I don't want to be stuck in something that's just going sideways when everything else is going great guns. So yeah, not much interest for me in that one. I bought Tesla in the dip winter to 2023 and sold summer 23. Great profit, about 100% gain. Yeah, it was. It did fantastically last year, Tesla. I think I bought it in a live stream somewhere. I think it was here, wasn't? Where was it? Here on the earnings shock. I think in October, or the earnings sell-off in October, and got out here. But no, it did have a brilliant run in 2023. So until the second half of 2023. And I think that's it, isn't it? Let me have a quick look at my stocks. What's moving today and what isn't? What's hot and what's not? Amazon, I think they had earnings last night, didn't they? So that's why Amazon is one of my biggest winners at the moment. So I don't know what Amazon's earnings look like. What did they look like last night? They beat by 25%. Okay, so the estimate was 0.8 and they came in at 1. Great. Okay, that was good. Microsoft, have they had earnings yet, Microsoft? Yeah. So I've been in Microsoft since December. Eaton, I did that one this week. That's done really well. First Energy, I am sure, I do have some shorts in here to try and balance off the longs. So I've been short First Energy since the 16th of Jan. That's done well. So that's, I went short at 38 in First Energy and they're 36.6 now. So, but yeah, Amazon and Microsoft are the strong performers today. So let's see. So that's it really. I think there's loads to watch. For me, it is all about stock markets, and there could be a trade this afternoon for me in the S&P or the Nasdaq, a short-term trade. And the level I'm going to watch is the lows hit after the payrolls. I think they're going to be interesting. So let's see. So for those of you in the WhatsApp group, I will update anything I do on that this afternoon. But for everyone else, we'll wrap it up there. So don't forget, make sure you're on that mailing list. That's free. Go to the website and put your email in. And I'll talk a bit more about that equities strategy thing this afternoon. What's it up? 16% at the moment. So I'll talk a bit more about that in a newsletter that will go out on Sunday. If you want to try the WhatsApp group, you can try that. Use the code YouTube, get 20% off the first month. Otherwise, we're all done, aren't we? So yeah, loads to watch. Let's see where we are next week. We'll do it all again next Friday. So until then, good luck with your trading and don't lose all your money.